Good morning. Welcome to the Science Mind class. I'm Dr. Petra, and we're happy that you're with us. Sorry for any delay, little technical difficulties as we continue to work with Zoom and Facebook. But I'm happy to be with you now, and love to have you on Facebook Live. And for those of you in the Zoom room, hello. And if you want to be in the Zoom room to ask questions or make comments, please just grab the link that Ryan has put into the description and in the chat. So today we're continuing our conversation about spiritual mind treatment, about prayer. And ooh man, doesn't it feel like we need a lot of this right now? Holy mackerel. Especially with technology and what's going on in the world. And it feels like life is a moving target a little bit right now. And we get to just breathe through it. So we're on page 151. We're finishing up the section on the laws governing prayer, and of course we call it spiritual mind treatment. It's our form of affirmative prayer. And I want to read this little section to you to get us started. There is a place in us which lies open to the infinite. But when the Spirit brings its gifts by pouring itself through us, it can give to us only what we can take. And this taking is mental. Now, what does that mean? What that means is our ability to accept the gifts that are pouring through us is a process that we actually have to engage in. And we have to imagine the possibility that things can be the way we would like them to be, what looks like the answer to our spiritual mind treatment. This taking is mental. Now, it's not just a rational, linear thought, but he goes on to say this: life must reveal itself to us through our intelligence. The pent-up energy of life and the possibility of further human evolution work through our imagination and will. So this taking, which is mental, and this process that is through our intelligence, is not a left brain, linear, rational thought. It is the use of our imagination and will. And it is actually the discipline of our consciousness that allows us to have a will that is focused on the end result. And it is the ability to imagine what Spirit is pouring into life and therefore pouring into us or the people that we're doing a spiritual mind treatment for, or the prayer. Do you see, that is a process of our whole being, but it is directed by our will and our ability to imagine. What does it look like when this pouring out of Spirit is actually accepted and expressed in our own lives? That is our part of the work. Our part of the work is to imagine what it means when we say the infinite is everywhere. That includes right where we are. That includes right where people who are suffering from the coronavirus are. That includes right where our creativity is as we are expressing newness in our lives right now. That includes where we are dealing with financial changes. That in every one of those cases, and everything about our life, right, the infinite is present. The one love, the one power, the one presence, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. That's what that means. And so it is our imagination that begins to play with, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What would my life be like if that were true? What would this other person's life be like if that were really true? And we opened ourselves, right? There is a place in us which lies open to the infinite. But when the Spirit brings its gift by pouring itself through us, it can give to us only what we take. And that taking is the ability to accept it, to imagine the possibilities, to embrace that, as opposed to the, quite frankly, rational, linear thought that says, well, I can't figure out how that's going to work, and oh my God, have you read the news? And holy mackerel, look at what's going on, and who's to blame, and who's at fault, and right? That's so when we're talking about mental and intelligence, we so easily misconstrue that as that part of us, the head part of us, and that's not the point at all. The point is our whole being, our intellect, our intentionality, the oomph of our consciousness and will, all focused together on the, well, quite frankly, the acceptance that what we believe to be true is actually true, that Spirit is present, that there is a power, that there is good being poured forth into the world, and that we can, in fact, align ourselves with it, right? And what we tend to do is over and over and over again talk ourselves out of it by pointing to evidence. But look at that, look at that, look at that. And what we forget to do is point at the evidence of all the times and ways and places where we've actually experienced this, where we've experienced it, we've seen it, other people have experienced it, we have their witness, their testimonial, their sharing. And sure enough, if it can work for them, it can work for us too. And yeah, okay, so before I go on, I just want to say welcome to all of you who are joining us. And man, if you want to make a comment or a sharing, please do put it in the chat, either on Facebook Live or in the Zoom room. You can raise your hand if you want to share or make a comment. Before we go on, I'm just going to check in with Ryan. Anything going on out there, or shall I just continue?
Well, if anybody would like to raise their hand and have a comment, now is the time to do so. So I guess we could give it a quick second.
Okay.
But right now it seems like everybody's kind of hanging on your every word. Oh, here we go. So I'm going to call in Valerie. Valerie, go ahead and just unmute yourself.
Hi, Valerie.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Me too.
Years ago, I found a little piece of newspaper that said, seeing is believing, and I cut it out, and I cut it in half, and I put it back up on my bulletin board saying, believing is seeing.
Yes. Beautiful.
And it stayed with me for many, many years on vision boards and things.
Yes.
So imagine, use your imagination, value your imagination. That's one of the great gifts I've gotten in my life, is that I just let myself walk into my studio, and my imagination tells me what needs to be done. So,
yes.
I keep creating amazing things. So keep it up. I love the work you're doing, and thank you so much for being here in my life.
Yay, thank you, Valerie. Right, and that's part of why we talk about the creative process. As you said, it's the imagination. But I'll tell you what, it's your will that causes you to walk into the studio. And it is your will that also says, oh, I'm feeling something, I'm sensing something, I have an idea, and then I'm gonna do this until I see what comes out, right? That's beautiful. And of course, that is what we say, believing is seeing, and is instead of waiting to see it before we believe it. That's actually the faculty of our imagination, right? It's so interesting. They keep talking about, well, we share the 98% of the DNA of chimpanzees and gorillas, and probably 80% of the DNA of rats. Our physicality is human and animal, and it is fully embedded in the physical experience. And so, there's been this big debate for, I don't know, for however long, hundreds of years probably, what makes us different than animals? What causes us to be a human being? And they talked about tool making and laughing and crying and things like that. And they have over time, in the course of all the studies, discovered, well, there's animals that do all those things. But there is one thing that they have not yet discovered anywhere else but in self-aware consciousness, human consciousness. At least that's the only one we know of. Surely it's elsewhere in the galaxies and probably on our planet, but it's the only one we know of right now. And that is, human beings have the faculty to imagine something that they can't see. We can actually imagine things we've never experienced. You can imagine right now a pink elephant. You've actually never seen a pink elephant, not in real. You can imagine flying through space in a flying saucer and landing on an entirely different planet. And you can imagine stepping out and seeing a purple sky and orange ground cover and, brilliant blue trees. Did I paint that picture vividly enough for you? You can actually imagine that, but you've never seen that. That's what we're doing. We're using that faculty to imagine seeing life as Spirit sees it. Seeing life from that place of infinite source, absolute beauty and full abundance and divine alignment, and life pouring itself into life effortlessly, moving out into expression in its fullness and its entirety. Right? That's a mind-boggling thought. And we're a place that can actually learn that, understand it, see it, and use it. The plants just are it. The animals just are it. Creation, nature just is it. It just does it without having to think about it in any way, shape, or form. We are both blessed and potentially also cursed with the ability to do something other than what our alignment with our natural way of being in the world would cause us to do. Our native engagement with life, we're actually able to do something other than that. And we can learn how to we can learn how to consciously align ourselves with life. That's what spiritual mind treatment does. That's what our prayer work does. So if we go on to page 152, this section, prayer is essential to happiness. Spiritual mind treatment is essential to happiness. Now, I noticed that one of the reasons why I love going through this book over and over and over again is because every chapter or every section I read, I'm like, oh my God, this is my favorite one. This could quite possibly be my favorite one. But of course, you'll hear me say that regularly. But this could quite possibly be at least one of my favorite ones. He says at the beginning of this section, prayer is not an act of overcoming God's reluctance, but should be an active acceptance of its highest willingness. Of its highest willingness. Through prayer or spiritual mind treatment, we recognize a spiritual law that has always existed and put ourselves in alignment with it. So it's not just the love that is pouring into life that we put ourselves in alignment with, but the law. The universal laws of cause and effect that we understand how they work. We put ourselves into alignment with it, right? And we decide to engage in our lives in alignment with the idea that the law of cause and effect is governing everything, as opposed to putting ourselves into alignment with, we can force something to happen, or we're just victims of everything, or we can't do anything, or it's just God's will deciding, right? It's actually putting ourselves in alignment with the universal law, the law of attraction, the law of circulation, the law of creation, the law of the creative process. These are all derivatives of the law of cause and effect. So we're putting ourselves into alignment with that. Which means what? Which means that we have to imagine the cause. We have to take the time to imagine a new cause that is perhaps very different from the current circumstance that we might be experiencing. Emerson said, is not prayer a study of truth, a sally of the soul into the unfound infinite? All right, I see that we have a comment or a question.
So I've seen this comment that's been popping up. What do we do when we can't stop these bad thoughts from running through our head?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, right? And that's why we use spiritual mind treatment, and we use affirmations. Affirmations are the cornerstone of prayer. Affirmations are the, well, what shall we say? It's the tool that I use when I need the most immediate act of will in my own consciousness. So I think of affirmations as two things. One, it is a deliberate act where I choose what I am going to think. Even though the bad thoughts are running in the background, even though the bad thoughts might be going there, I am not those. We have thoughts, but they are not who we are. Just as we have feelings, but they are not who we are. And so the use of, and I don't, most people, they write these affirmations that are paragraphs. Okay, that's starting to be a prayer. No, an affirmation is 10 words or less. It's something that you can remember in the heat of the moment when you feel like you're starting to drown in the bad thoughts, in the negative thinking, and you want something that I think of it like a life raft. And I start moving towards some of those. There's only one life, and that life is my life. There's only one source, and that source is my source. Life is always moving in the direction of more life. Therefore, it will be okay. These are spiritual truths that I affirm and cling to. Right? And so that's a deliberate act of will. And by deciding to think that, do you see I'm interrupting the negative thinking. I'm interrupting the negative thinking. I'm over and over and over again interrupting the negative thinking. The other thing I do that I think of when I think about affirmations, and this is what I also do, is that it's white noise. Right? If I'm running my spiritual truth in my consciousness, then I'm actually drowning out the other thoughts. I do seem to be able to think two things at the same time. I can actually think a positive thought and have a negative thought running in the background, which is so annoying because, of course, I was taught at one point you can't think of two things at the same time. Maybe I'm just flipping back and forth between the two. But by, again, that deliberate act of will, of keeping that thought in front of me, I literally feel like I'm creating a barrier of white noise of my choosing that begins to drown out those other thoughts. Ryan, did we have another question or comment?
Yeah, and it kind of goes in the same vein of what you're talking about right now. And I know for me, I personally experience this a lot. It's great. I have affirmations written on my mirror. I have them in my car. But for the life of me, when I get around somebody who triggers me, that affirmation goes out the window.
Yeah.
So what kind of things can we work on to kind of help us through those triggers?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? And so awareness is half the battle. So we have to begin to decide that we want to become aware of ourselves. We have to be willing to look. Oh wow, I'm triggered. We have to be willing. The first thing is we have to be willing to see ourselves. Awareness is 50% of the battle. If we're not aware that we're triggered, we're just going to go right on and we're going to just keep playing out the old patterns. So, how do we practice self-awareness? Gosh, There are so many spiritual practices that are teaching us self-awareness, mindfulness practice, to be mindful, to be present in the moment and pay attention to the moment. If we start practicing that practice when we're not triggered, we will carry that skill into being triggered. Journaling, writing about something that has really triggered me, right? And then begin to apply spiritual truth to it. We can watch the shift in consciousness. As I start doing that process in journaling, I begin to develop the skill of noticing that I'm writing all this crappy stuff down, and then all of a sudden going, but wait, I don't, that's not how I want to behave. I don't actually believe in blame. I don't actually believe in making somebody else wrong. So, well, I want to start thinking about this differently. Do you see, in the journaling process, I'm literally realizing what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what's going on with me. So, and that's the moment. Right there is the moment where I get to say, but that's not how I want to be. That's not how I want to behave. And in that moment, I have the opportunity to engage my will and breathe and shift right there. And it takes practice, right? You're not a brilliant 3-point shooter in the heat of a basketball game if you haven't been out on the court when it's super quiet and hit 3 points one after another, over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? You practice the skill when it's quiet. You practice the skill when you're all by yourself and you get really good at it. Then you play with your teammates who, oh yeah, sure, they're trying to get in your way, but they're not the opposing team. And you practice and practice and practice and practice, and you get as good in that situation as you were by yourself. Then you take that skill to the opposing team, and it doesn't matter what they're going to do because you've practiced so much that no matter what's happening, you're less likely to be rattled, and you hit that 3-point shot. We sometimes think that, well, I've read the book, I've read how to do a 3-point shot, I've read the book, and now I'm going to go in the heat of the moment and I'm going to make that shot. That is not going to happen. Well, maybe once in a lifetime. So how we do it is this is why we teach meditation and mindfulness and doing these practices in the quiet of our morning practice, in our courses, in times when we're not triggered, so that skill, because that's what it is, it's a mental and spiritual skill, so that skill becomes available to us. And then, of course, we have to decide to use it. Yes, thanks, Ryan.
So shout out Bobby, she has a question.
Hi, Bobby.
She asks, might we say we are reprogramming our response to our triggers?
Yes, ultimately, that's exactly what we're doing. You're exactly right. And there's lots of tools that we do to reprogram. So the first thing we have to do is we have to see that we're responding out of an old pattern. We have to recognize that that's what we're doing, and then we have to pattern interrupt with a new pattern, with a new idea, with a new way that we want to think or be. And over time, we do begin to rewrite those patterns. That's the good news, right? The good news is that we are run on habits and patterns, but habits and patterns can be changed. It just takes imagination and will. Okay, so here's an example. When I stopped drinking, oh my God, I stopped smoking first. And then I stopped drinking. So when I stopped smoking, the biggest question I had was, well, when I'm drinking, what am I going to do with my hands? Because that's what I would do, is I would smoke. Oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine having a drink without a smoke. So I began imagining myself not having to pull that cigarette out. And so I found myself tearing up little pieces of paper. The napkin, the little coaster, but it gave me something to do with my hands. And then I realized, well, this really isn't going to work very well. And I started to, and then when I quit drinking, I was like, okay, well, now I don't have a drink or a smoke. What am I supposed to do when I'm like around people and talk to them? You know me, I'm like a massive introvert. What am I supposed to do with my hands? What am I supposed to? So I began imagining myself being natural in those environments and not needing anything to occupy myself, that I was enough. Do you see? I have to imagine something different than what I'm currently doing or being. Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
Well, that's funny you bring that up, because ever since this Corona thing has happened, Petra, I thought about taking up drinking. All right.
I totally get it.
A question. Shauna, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Shauna.
Good morning, Dr. Petra.
Good morning.
So I love what we're talking about today, because it's just so timely.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you always tell us is that it is now that we're getting to practice
Yes.
our spiritual gifts. So I have a question. I am doing a lot of practice, Dr. Petra. I'm getting a lot of practice.
Yeah.
I have one question. How do I hold at the same time, simultaneously, my practice and my planting my cause, and sitting at peace in the present moment with uncertainty and not seeing it yet?
Yeah. It's a great question, Shauna. Thank you so much. We are going to talk about it a little bit in our Sunday celebration that comes up shortly. We call it living an answered prayer. How do we live in answered prayer when the prayer hasn't been answered yet? And that, again, is the function of our will. And I think we have so overly committed ourselves to our comfort. And in the science of mind and new thought, we are very committed to ease and grace. And yet an act of will is a deliberate act of intention. And it is saying, I am going to hold this truth regardless of whether I see it or not. As Valerie so beautifully pointed out, believing is seeing. And that is a very real part of the practice. And to sit in that unknown of how it's going to all work out, but trusting that it does all work out, is a profound act of trust and faith. And yeah, we have to keep bringing ourselves back to that. I fall off and then I bring myself back, and then I fall off and then I bring myself back. And it is a deliberate over and over and over again reminding myself, what do I believe? Do I really believe that that's true? And if so, as I said, to me sometimes it's a life raft. I'm literally clinging to my truth in the midst of the stormy waves. And by God, I'm going to just keep clinging to it. And it is a challenge. So I want to answer that question as well with this beautiful, it's some more beautiful words from this section in our book. Prayer, spiritual mind treatment, is constructive because it enables us to establish closer contact with the fountain of wisdom, and we are less likely to be influenced by appearances around us. This is why we do our spiritual practice. This is why we do spiritual mind treatment every day, whether we need it or not, whether we're trying to create something or not. It is the opportunity to establish a closer contact with this fountain of wisdom, and then we are less likely to be influenced by the appearances around us. It goes on to say this: prayer, spiritual mind treatment, is essential, not to the salvation of the soul for the soul is never lost, but to the conscious well-being of the soul that does not understand itself. There is a vitality in our communion with the infinite, which is productive of the highest good. As fire warms the body, as food strengthens us, as sunshine raises our spirits, so there is a subtle transfusion of some invisible force in such communion. Do you see, we're actually shifted into a deeper state of consciousness when we do spiritual mind treatment. It's not just that we're trying to manifest something. We are literally shifting ourselves into a place where we understand ourselves. Do you see, we're not just human. We're not just victims of circumstances. We're spiritual beings, deathless, changeless, immortal. We were before we were born, and we will be after we die. And we are the place where the universe is waking up to itself, where life and love are waking up to see itself and to deliberately become aware of its own creations. Do you see, then, when we know this, first of all, we know that no matter how bad or how something becomes, our life is assured. Our eternal, immortal life is assured. And that we have the ability to walk through it. We have the ability to walk through it from a deep, deep, deep place of knowing who we are, as opposed to being buffeted around by all the appearances and all the stuff that's going on. It's not always easy, but it is the practice. Ryan, did you have another comment for me?
Yeah, so I have somebody who wants to ask a question.
Great.
Allison, can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, Allison.
And Allison, there you are.
You know what's funny about that? This is actually Jeff and Karen.
Hi, Jeff and Karen.
Hi. So the reason Allison showed up is because I'm using my oldest daughter's Zoom account.
Lovely.
So that's Allison. So
we'll know it's you guys.
You'll know it's us, right? So in our Zoom dialogue yesterday, we looked into our beliefs about coping and thriving in difficult circumstances, for sure.
Yeah.
And some of what we observed in our collective community was that that we can find optimism both at the macro, in the world, and also in the micro, that is in our lives.
Yes.
And that gratitude for those simple gifts we so often take for granted, it's kind of
we lost him.
Distraction these days.
Yes. So
and being able to revisit simple pleasures.
Yes.
There was a great sense of community support. There was a call to accept our good.
Yes.
And that there is unlimited good right now, right in this moment, in all of this, and that one of us called it collateral beauty.
Oh, I love that.
That was actually our daughter.
Oh, I love that.
And that some of us are committing to standing up and speaking for the best examples of decency.
Yes, 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 yes.
So
beautiful.
There's a range of states of being here called coping to thriving. And I just wondered, Karen and I wondered, if you would take up this range, and just, if that's comfortable for you.
Sure. Thank you, Jeff. And I knew you guys were going to take that up as a topic, and I thought, oh my God, that is just brilliant, right? Because I think sometimes we use our spiritual practice to resign ourselves to what is. And we think that we just have to find a way to accept it and grin and bear it. And I don't think that's the point at all. And I loved that, coping often means like, well, I'm in survival mode, and I am going to survive, and I'm going to make it through by hook or by crook. And sometimes that is actually how it feels. But there's this whole, as you said, this whole range where we begin to say, I'm going to get the juice out of this. I'm going to get whatever good I can out of this for myself and for everybody else. And moving into that place where I really invite myself into a life that's thriving. And so often we think our thriving is externally produced and it is externally evidenced. We're thriving because we're making money, because our business is growing, because we've attracted a mate, because of we're wearing cool clothes and we can do things. Okay, if those are things that are important to us, yes, we can do all of those things. But true thriving means that we're making a life of meaning and value and beauty and order, that our life reflects the consciousness of alignment with the One, that reflects the qualities and attributes of spirit. And I love that phrase, collateral beauty. And our lives have become so complicated and so complex, and there's so much going on that we've sort of been collectively forced to take a breath. It's so interesting. What is the first thing we do? Somebody asked, what is the first thing? How do I not be triggered? Or how do I deal with it when I am triggered? Well, one of the first things is become aware of it and take the breath. So we've gotten to become aware about how many inconsequential things we've been totally wrapped up in. And we've collectively been invited to take a breath. And to imagine that sitting at home with our families can actually be valuable and beautiful and good. And that we can find those moments and we can believe that that is a part of this life that we're creating, right? And that's a part of the process of beginning to see something in our imagination that we can then see, well, this must now spill over into how this experience of what's going on is going to manifest itself in my life and in the life of the collective. And I love that you mentioned gratitude. Everything changes. Instead of talking about all the things that aren't working, to really focus on where things are happening, and the gratitude for the things we ourselves have, the gratitude for the way that the universe is showing up in our own lives, and the gratitude for all these amazing things that people are doing all over the country and all over the planet to help us get through this. And we get to see that as people are imagining it new and different, all that beauty is actually happening. Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing that. Ryan, I saw you had another comment.
Well, I think when you said take a breath, I think everybody collectively did that. All right, so I have Kia. Kia, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Kia.
Hi, Dr. Petra. Hi.
Hi.
And thank you, Jeff, for the dialogue circle yesterday. That was really good. And I just wanted to say that one of the things that I've been doing and have been doing for a couple of years now is staying away from the news. And it is one of those things that when I first started it, a lot of people kept telling me, but you have to look at the news. You have to find out what's happening. You can't just not pay attention to it. But I knew for me personally, the amount of negativity that was bringing into my life and and how I was behaving as a result of that.
Yes.
And I wasn't taking it up in a good way. And most importantly, I wasn't using that information to do good with it.
Yes.
I wasn't changing my behavior or anything from it. So it took me a while to really cut it off. There were times when I would go back to it, but it was just more of almost like a perverse reality TV.
Yes.
It's a new coming to me. And so with this all happening, I was already in the habit of not looking at news.
Mm-hmm.
So now I scroll through my phone maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day.
Yep.
And find out what I need to do, but I'm not overwhelmed with it. I'm not in fear. And I have a lot of optimism. And that's been my practice for a few years now. So it's very easy for me to do now and continue to do now.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kia. And I mean, you're so right on. We need 10 or 20 minutes once a day to find out whatever it is we feel like we need to know. And that's plenty. And otherwise, we simply are focusing on the wrong thing. Why? Because the news is all sensationalism. When was the last time that you read a report that said 97% of the people who are getting the COVID-19 are recovering? How many reports show you that? Now, we do have to know that people are dying, and we do have to know that what we need to do to make sure that we're flattening the curve and not spreading it. For goodness sake, stay home, wear a bandana if you have to go outside. I mean, really, this is not rocket science, people. If we could all do this for 2 to 3 weeks, we would stop it in its tracks. But of course, that hasn't happened in the United States. And so our job is to then look for the good and praise it. 97% of the people who get the virus survive. But that's not what the news shows us. The news yells at us and screams at us because it wants to capture that negative addiction that we have to ain't it awful. Ain't it awful? And our brains are programmed that way. Our brains are programmed to look for negativity, look for the threat, look for the threat, look for the threat, look for the threat, right? And how do we survive it? And I think that's, going back to Jeff, your comment about the dialogue circle, right? That's what we're doing when we're coping. When we're coping, we're managing the threat. We're managing this, and we're making ourselves secure and safe, and that's what we're doing. We're surviving. We're managing what our reptilian brain and the amygdala is showing us. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, pay attention, you gotta, and of course the fear is, well, if I don't pay attention, it's gonna get me somehow that I wasn't aware of. And our spiritual practice and our moving to a more conscious way of engaging in life lifts us out of that, what's called the amygdala hijack, and moves us into the place where, as Kia so beautifully said, I control what's coming in. I pay attention to what I need, and then I pay attention to other things like spiritual truths. And that's what our whole, and so how beautiful, right? So we do our spiritual mind treatment, but ultimately our life is our prayer, right? Ultimately our life is our prayer. And it's what's coming in and it's what's going out. It's what's coming in to our ears and senses, what we imagine and what we speak outwardly and energetically project back into the world. He goes on to say this: prayer has stimulated countless millions of people to higher thoughts and nobler deeds. Kia, just as you were talking about, right? You were inundating in negativity, and it wasn't helping you decide to do something better or different or make a decision to participate in the change. Prayer, spiritual mind treatment, has stimulated countless millions of people to higher thoughts and nobler deeds. That which tends to connect our minds with the universal mind lets in a flood of its consciousness. Let's read that again. That which tends to connect our minds with the universal mind lets in a flood of its consciousness. Right? Prayer opens the direct experience of the spiritual nature of life and the truth of who we are. It aligns us with that direct experience. We can't even say that it opens a window, because there is no place where the universal stops and the individual starts. We just think that there's a barrier because we think of ourselves as only human. Well, I'm just human. Well, there's a part of me that just doesn't know, right? And we give tremendous credibility to that part, as if it were the only part of us that has power and has will. And it is the spiritual side of our experience that is the I am that I am. And when we connect our minds with the universal mind, that consciousness of infinite supply, infinite source, infinite good, this must work out. There is a law, and it does move in the direction of more life. Principle is not bound by precedent. There is order and harmony and beauty and wholeness to be had, and we are aligning ourselves with it. Do you see that consciousness, that universal consciousness becomes the floodgate, the flood that is pouring itself through the gates of our consciousness into our lives, and then becomes the way in which we then speak and act and engage in the world. Ryan, did you have another comment?
Yeah, so there's two questions, so I'll segment them out. So the first question was coming off of Facebook.
Hi.
And shout out to Chantel.
Hi, Chantel.
She says, Dr. Petra, what is your favorite affirmation?
Oh man, I have quite a number of them. And so how I construct my affirmations is it depends on what I'm working on. If I'm working on health, it's I'm one with God, I'm totally healthy. If I'm working on, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel like I just don't know what to do next, or I'm like, oh gosh, it's just so much going on right now. And then my affirmation is I'm one with God. There is an inexhaustible resource. I'm tapped into an inexhaustible supply. If you don't like, I use the word God because it's short. So if you don't like the word God, I'm one with spirit, I'm one with the universe. I'm reminding myself that the universe is right where I am. And then I am tacking on the thing that I want to remember right now. I want to remember this. And it's true, not because I said it's true. It's true because it is true. Do you see the difference? It's not true because I'm affirming it. I'm affirming it because it's true. And beginning those affirmations with my oneness. And sometimes I say, Spirit is right where I am and absolutely knows how to speak as me. When I don't know what to say or do, and I feel like, okay, there's a lot going on, and I'm hoping that I'm ministering appropriately and sharing the right kind of information and giving you good stuff, and is this really what, is this what we should be doing right now? The Petra, the little I, is like clueless and often wonders whether, right? But then I affirm, Spirit is right where I am, and the wisdom and intelligence of Spirit absolutely knows what is needed, and it moves through me. So do you see, I construct very powerful, short affirmations in the moment. They always start in some way. The first 3 or 4 words have to do with reminding myself that I am more than just my human personality or my sense of separation. And the second one is the spiritual truth that I am hammering home to myself over and over and over again. I hope that's helpful.
All right, and so the second question for you, Dr. Petra, is we often hear about this, you must be what you want to see.
Right.
How is this different than like an affirmative prayer? I mean, what's the differences between praying and then being?
Oh, that's a very good question. So let's talk about 2 different kinds of affirmative prayer. 2 different kinds of spiritual mind treatments in the last 4 minutes that we have, right? Science of Mind separates them out into mental treatment and spiritual treatment. You don't need to remember that, it doesn't make any difference. It also separates it out between the argumentative treatment and the realization type of treatment. So, when we are fortunate enough to be in that state of bliss, to be in that state of connection, to be doing a spiritual mind treatment about something about which we are not overly triggered or troubled by, right? Our spiritual mind treatment comes from that place where we know who we are. And we simply have a, what did Emerson call it? He says, prayer is the soliloquy of a beautiful and beholding and jubilant soul. And so we're just jubilantly praising the experience that we're having of being this one infinite power and presence as us, and how abundant we are, and how it's showing up in our lives, how healthy we are, whatever it is we're doing treatment about, right? Because we are being that, and what we're doing with our spiritual mind treatment is we're realizing it, and we're reveling in it, and we're juicing that, and we're making that more and more real in our imagination so that we can more fully accept it, embrace it, and therefore more fully experiencing it. Great. We can do lots of treatment from that place, and it's beautiful and wonderful and fabulous. But often we're doing spiritual mind treatment because we don't feel like we are being that which we want to be. We don't feel abundant. We don't feel healthy. We don't feel centered, right? So then we go to the argumentative spiritual mind treatment. It's called the mental treatment, and it is where we are constructing for ourselves a deliberate act of imagination and will, and we are showing ourselves the spiritual truth, what's true about the spiritual truth, why it's true, and how it shows up in our lives because it's true. And it's called the argumentative treatment, not because we're arguing with God or arguing with the law. It's used as like we are arguing a case. Well, if this is true about the universe, and I'm a part of the universe, and if it's true that this is how the law works, and that law is working through me, and if these are qualities of God, and I'm a part of that, so those qualities are my qualities, then by God, it's going to show up in my life this way. This is how it's showing up in my life, as health, or as abundance, or as consciousness, or as a deeper peace, or as a building business. Do you see? I am showing myself that these things that I am becoming in my consciousness are true because I know who I am, because I know what's true about the universe. And so I argue, not, as I said, not to anything else, but I'm creating this deeply developed sense so that my imagination can at the end accept, well, oh my God, of course that's true. Wait, that is true. That is true. There is one power and presence, and that one power and presence is my life, and the law is working, and life is unfolding, and sure enough, by God, the abundance of the universe is, in fact, manifesting in my life, period, end of sentence. Oh my God, I'm so grateful that I have remembered this truth. And do you see, I have moved myself to being that within my own consciousness. That's a mental treatment, an argumentative treatment. And one isn't better than the other. It has everything to do with where we start. We end up in the same place in both cases, having a deep sense of awareness of spiritual truth and being that in our own consciousness. And we're shifting into that place over and over again. And sometimes for me, especially if I'm really stuck in the mental argumentative treatment part, it can feel like my treatment can take a number of days. Over time, each time I do that treatment, I'm constructing a deeper and deeper and deeper sense of imagining that that's really true, until all of a sudden I pop through and I'm like, well, yes, that is the truth, by God. And do you see, I have moved into the place of being that. And if I forget, well, the next day I do that treatment again. Maybe not with the same words, although it could be. Could be you write a really beautiful treatment and you keep saying it. I tend to, in my argumentative treatments, I tend to be very passionate, because by God, I am going to shift my consciousness. And in my realization treatments, I tend to be very effusive, and I love to revel in the experience of it. And my imagination, I'm using the words to create the internal experience of it. And I'm living in it and reveling in it and being it and really allowing it to be the truth of my soul and my consciousness. And then I'm like, ah. And so those tend to be a little more passionate that way. So, we are getting to the end of our time together. Thanks for your patience with the beginning of the time. If we're ever not right on time, you can know that by God, Ryan is making it happen. So just be patient with us. I love having you here with us on a Sunday morning class, and we'll see you in 15 minutes if you choose to stick around for our Sunday celebration, Be Made New. Thanks so much. I love you guys so much, and I'm so grateful that you're part of this community. Have a blessed and beautiful Sunday.